Navigating the Labyrinth of Human Nature, a Stoic guide to avoiding toxic individuals. The human experience is a complex tapestry woven with threads of joy, sorrow, connection, and conflict. As we navigate this intricate landscape, we inevitably encounter a diverse range of personalities, some of whom enrich our lives while others, unfortunately, diminish them. The ancient philosophy of Stoicism, with its emphasis on virtue, reason, and self-control, offers profound wisdom for discerning these potentially harmful individuals and safeguarding our well-being. By understanding the characteristics of these toxic personalities, we can cultivate healthier relationships, protect our inner peace, and ultimately lead more fulfilling lives. This exploration, drawing inspiration from Stoic principles and insights, will delve into 15 types of individuals that Stoicism advises us to be wary of, blending insightful commentary with relevant examples and contemporary applications. Remember, the goal isn't to judge others harshly, but to become more discerning in our relationships and protect ourselves from negativity and harm. The pursuit of virtue and inner peace, central tenets of Stoicism, are often challenged by the presence of individuals who embody negative traits and behaviors. These individuals, through their actions and attitudes, can erode our sense of well-being, hinder our personal growth, and even cause significant emotional distress. Stoic philosophy, therefore, emphasizes the importance of recognizing and, when necessary, distancing ourselves from such individuals. It's not about fostering animosity or judgment, but rather about cultivating self-awareness and making conscious choices that protect our mental and emotional health. This journey of self-preservation begins with identifying the specific traits that Stoicism deems detrimental to our well-being. 1. The seductive trap of the flatterer. Among the myriad of personalities we encounter, the flatterer stands out as a particularly insidious threat. These individuals, often driven by ulterior motives, shower us with insincere praise and excessive compliments, not out of genuine admiration, but rather to manipulate us for their own gain. Their words, like honeyed poison, can cloud our judgment and lead us down paths that ultimately serve their interests, not our own. It is important to recognize the difference between a sincere compliment, offered with genuine appreciation, and the exaggerated accolades of a flatterer. The latter often feels forced, unrealistic, and disproportionate to the situation. The flatterer may seek to gain our favor to ask for a favor, secure a position of power, exert influence through our approval, or simply inflate their own ego by basking in our admiration. Regardless of their specific aim, their excessive praise is merely a tool to achieve their desired end. The Stoics, therefore, urge us to be vigilant against such tactics, encouraging us to question the motivations behind any over-the-top flattery and to avoid placing undue weight on the words of those who seek to manipulate us through false praise. We must cultivate the ability to see through the surface and discern the flatterer's true intentions, recognizing that insincere praise ultimately benefits no one. Consider, for example, a colleague who constantly praises your work, even when it's subpar, and then subtly ask for you to cover their shifts or share your resources. This individual is likely a flatterer, using praise as a means to exploit your generosity. Similarly, a friend who incessantly compliments your appearance and then asks for a loan may be driven by ulterior motives. In both cases, the excessive flattery serves as a smokescreen, masking their self-serving intentions. The Stoic approach is to remain grounded in reality, acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses without being swayed by empty praise, and to discern the true motivations of those who lavish us with it. By doing so, we can protect ourselves from being manipulated and maintain our integrity. 2. The insatiable hunger of the greedy. Another personality type that warrants caution, according to Stoicism, is the greedy individual. These individuals are consumed by material desires, their lives dominated by the relentless pursuit of wealth and possessions. Their insatiable avarice clouds their judgment, distorts their values, and ultimately undermines their character. For the greedy, accumulating money, possessions, and status symbols is the primary, if not the sole driving force in their lives. They are perpetually craving more, never feeling satisfied, even when they have already amassed considerable wealth. Their greed knows no bounds. They will scheme, exploit, and even step on others to acquire more wealth and possessions. They view life as a zero-sum game, believing that more for them means less for everyone else. They are unwilling to share, driven by the relentless desire to possess everything for themselves. Furthermore, their greed often stems from a profound sense of insecurity. No amount of wealth can ever truly satisfy them, as they are constantly driven by the fear of lacking something. This constant striving, fueled by insecurity and a distorted sense of values, destroys their peace of mind and compromises their integrity. The Stoics recognize that greed stems from a mindset of scarcity, the belief that there is not enough to go around. The greedy are never content because they're constantly focused on what they lack. This mindset is a recipe for perpetual dissatisfaction and anxiety. The Stoics advise us to cultivate a sense of contentment and to focus on things of true value, such as character, wisdom, and serenity. The Stoic path involves recognizing the inherent limitations of material possessions and cultivating a sense of inner sufficiency. This does not necessarily mean rejecting material comforts altogether, but rather placing them in their proper perspective. Fulfillment comes from within, not from external gains. It's about finding joy in the simple things, cultivating meaningful relationships, and striving to live a virtuous life. We can observe this in action by looking at the contrast between a successful business person who dedicates their money to social and environmental causes and one who accumulates wealth to the detriment of their family and community. The Stoic would argue that the former is leading a more fulfilling life. 3. The poisonous sting of the envious. The envious represent another type of toxic individual that the Stoics advise us to avoid emulating. These are individuals consumed by resentment, constantly fixating on the talents, successes, or possessions of others. Their minds are poisoned by jealousy, leading them to believe that another person's good fortune somehow diminishes their own. They operate from a mindset of scarcity, assuming that life is a zero-sum game, and therefore, when someone else gains something, it means less for them. This belief fuels resentment, insecurity, and animosity within the envious. They act out these feelings by attempting to undermine those they envy. They will belittle others' talents, dismiss their successes as mere luck or privilege, and spread nasty rumors. In essence, they attempt to tear down those they perceive as being above them. Envy also makes the envious person spiteful. They cannot bear to see someone else succeed, so they attempt to sabotage their efforts. Rather than finding inspiration in others' accomplishments, they are consumed by a desire to spoil them. The envious person's jealousy leads them to make snide remarks, deliver backhanded compliments, and secretly revel in the misfortune of those they envy. They may even engage in acts of sabotage, subtly undermining the success of others. This behavior stems from a deep-seated insecurity and a belief that their own worth is diminished by the success of others. The Stoics recognize envy as a type of involuntary moral weakness stemming from a lack of wisdom, but they emphasize that we can choose whether or not to act from envy. The wise course is to view others with goodwill and celebrate their successes, not resent them. We should be inspired by others' talents to cultivate our own virtues rather than falling into envy's trap. By focusing on our own progress and celebrating the success of others, we can overcome the corrosive effects of envy. The Stoic approach encourages us to cultivate gratitude for what we have and to focus on our own personal growth. It also emphasizes the importance of celebrating the successes of others, recognizing that their achievements do not diminish our own worth. By reframing our perspective and focusing on what we can control, our own actions and attitudes, we can overcome the corrosive effects of envy and cultivate a more positive and fulfilling life. One way to counteract envy is to actively practice gratitude for the things we already possess. Keeping a gratitude journal and writing down things you are thankful for daily will remind you of the abundance in your life. 4. The uncontrolled fire of the angry. The chronically angry person represents another problematic personality type that the Stoics warn us about. These individuals are prone to frequent rages, bitterness, and a constant desire for revenge. Their temper often overpowers their reason and judgment, leading them to act impulsively and destructively. The angry person is easily triggered by minor provocations, both real and imagined. They tend to interpret others' actions and words in the worst possible light, and they are quick to take offense. They also carry grudges for extended periods, refusing to forgive or let go of past hurts. The Stoics believe that the roots of anger lie in thwarted desires and a sense of helplessness. The angry person feels that they are not getting what they deserve from the world, which breeds resentment and the urge to lash out. Rage and retaliation become their way of asserting control, albeit in a destructive manner. When gripped by anger, the angry person is unable to think clearly or act constructively. Their temper clouds their faculties of reason, making them more likely to speak harshly and act impulsively, thereby exacerbating the situation rather than improving it. The Stoic approach is to acknowledge anger as an emotion that may arise involuntarily, but to choose whether or not to act from it. The wise course is to pause for perspective when we feel provoked. Getting swept up in anger only poisons our own lives. It is better to act from reason and self-control, not petty grudges and resentment. As Epictetus stated, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. The Stoics also advocate for practices like meditation and mindfulness to help cultivate emotional regulation and reduce the frequency and intensity of anger. By practicing these techniques, we can learn to observe our anger without being consumed by it, allowing us to respond more rationally and constructively. Furthermore, understanding the underlying causes of our anger can be incredibly helpful. Often, anger is a symptom of deeper issues, such as fear, insecurity, or frustration. By identifying these root causes, we can begin to address them directly, reducing the likelihood of anger arising in the first place. For instance, if you find yourself getting angry at your partner for not helping with household chores, it might be because you feel undervalued and overwhelmed. Addressing these underlying feelings of being undervalued can lead to healthier, more constructive conversations. 5. The drain of the complainer. The chronic complainer represents another tiresome personality type that the Stoics warn us to avoid emulating. These individuals are perpetually negative, constantly criticizing and moaning about their circumstances. They spread gloom rather than light, finding fault with almost everything: the weather, the government, their job, their relationships. Minor imperfections are magnified into massive grievances. The complainer's attitude is that nothing is ever good enough. Rather than taking constructive action, the complainer simply whines, playing the victim and acting powerless when they could take steps to improve things. The complainer craves others' sympathy and tends to broadcast their grievances widely to get attention. This breeds negativity that drags down themselves and those around them. Complainers don't realize that their venting just reinforces their unhappiness, creating a toxic mindset. As Epictetus stated, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. The Stoics teach us not to emulate the complainers. Though we may face difficulties, we only make things worse for ourselves by excessive lamenting. It's far wiser to focus on making the best of what we can control, taking constructive action rather than wallowing in negativity. Hardships are inevitable, but we decide whether we meet them with wisdom and resilience or futile complaints. The Stoic approach involves shifting our focus from what we cannot control to what we can. This means taking responsibility for our own actions and attitudes, and focusing on making the best of the present moment. It also involves cultivating gratitude for the things we have, rather than dwelling on what we lack. We can apply this principle by setting realistic goals and focusing on small, achievable steps towards improvement. By celebrating these small wins, we can build momentum and foster a sense of agency and control. For example, if you're overwhelmed by a large project at work, break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks. Completing each task will provide a sense of accomplishment and reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed. Furthermore, it can be helpful to limit our exposure to complainers. While we may not be able to completely avoid them, we can choose to disengage from their negativity. This might involve changing the subject, setting boundaries, or simply limiting the amount of time we spend with them. Ultimately, the Stoic approach is to cultivate a positive and proactive mindset, focusing on what we can control and taking responsibility for our own happiness. 6. The pit of self-pity. Another tiresome personality type that the Stoics caution us against emulating is the self-pitying individual. These people wallow in their own misery and portray themselves as victims at every turn. The self-pitying person takes no responsibility for their circumstances. They blame other people, fate, the universe, anything but themselves for their troubles. Their attitude is poor, pitiful me. I deserve better than this unfair world. This breeds a mentality of powerlessness and resentment. The self-pitying individual expects others to coddle them and make things right. They broadcast tales of woe to elicit sympathy and reassurance. They're not to blame, which keeps the self-pitying person trapped. By making themselves out to be a victim, they evade accountability and the need to take action to improve their situation. Their self-absorption crowds out compassion for what others may be dealing with. The Stoics warn us against the mindset of self-pity. They advise taking a balanced view of life's ups and downs. Rather than wallowing when faced with adversity, we should focus on what we can control and build resilience, not portray ourselves as victims. Challenges are inevitable, but we decide whether we meet them with maturity or melodrama. As Marcus Aurelius stated, begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all due to the offender's ignorance of what is good and evil." The Stoic approach to overcoming self-pity involves cultivating a sense of agency and responsibility for our own lives. This means taking ownership of our actions and choices and recognizing that we have the power to change our circumstances. It also involves developing a sense of perspective, recognizing that everyone faces challenges and setbacks, and that our own suffering is not unique. We can apply this principle by setting realistic goals and focusing on small, achievable steps towards improvement. By celebrating these small wins, we can build momentum and foster a sense of agency and control. For example, if you're struggling with your fitness, start by committing to a 15-minute walk each day. As you build momentum, you can gradually increase the duration and intensity of your workouts. Furthermore, it can be helpful to practice gratitude for the things we do have, rather than dwelling on what we lack. This helps us to shift our focus from negativity to positivity and to recognize the abundance in our lives. We can actively participate in helping others and do acts of kindness or service to move our focus outward instead of inward. Ultimately, the Stoic approach is to cultivate a proactive and resilient mindset, focusing on what we can control and taking responsibility for our own happiness. 7. The illusion of arrogance. Arrogance is another toxic personality trait that Stoicism cautions against. Arrogant individuals possess an inflated sense of self-importance and superiority over others. Their excessive pride blinds them to their flaws and actual standing in the world. The arrogant person presumes they are always right, the best at what they do, and deserving of special treatment. They are convinced of their superior talents, intelligence, status, and entitlements. This leads them to talk down to others and view advice or criticism as beneath them. An arrogant attitude breeds intolerance, disrespect, and hostility towards those deemed lower than them. The arrogant individual is unable to recognize their mistakes or limitations because that would shatter their grandiose self-image. Their pride leaves no room for humility or self-reflection. This makes the arrogant unteachable. They reject useful feedback that would help them improve or show consideration for others. They also have trouble forming genuine connections since relating as an equal does not satisfy their need for dominance and recognition. The Stoics warn against the folly of arrogance. They advise cultivating humility and recognizing our human fallibility. Pride should come from living virtuously, not inflating our own importance. As Marcus Aurelius stated, "You have no right to pass judgment on others at all. Their natures are the ones responsible. Their dispositions have become as they are under compulsion of character and necessity." The Stoic remedy for arrogance involves cultivating self-awareness and practicing humility. This means honestly assessing our strengths and weaknesses and recognizing that we are all fallible human beings. It also means being open to feedback and criticism and being willing to learn from our mistakes. We can practice humility by actively seeking out opportunities to serve others. This might involve volunteering our time, helping a neighbor in need, or simply offering a listening ear to a friend who is struggling. By focusing on the needs of others, we can shift our attention away from ourselves and cultivate a more balanced perspective. Furthermore, it can be helpful to remind ourselves of our own limitations. This might involve reflecting on past mistakes or acknowledging the areas in which we need to improve. By recognizing our own fallibility, we can become more compassionate and understanding towards others. Ultimately, the Stoic approach is to cultivate a balanced and realistic view of ourselves, recognizing both our strengths and our weaknesses, and striving to live a virtuous life. 8. The isolation of selfishness. Another problematic personality type discussed in Stoic teachings is the selfish individual. These people prioritize their own interests above all else and lack consideration for how their actions impact others. The selfish person tends to view everything in terms of what's in it for me. Their main decision-making calculus is how they can personally benefit. They pursue their own agenda without weighing collateral effects on others. This leads the selfish person to take advantage of people, ignore others' needs, break promises, and shirk duties that do not immediately serve them. They see no issue with benefiting at others' expense. Their excessive self-interest blinds them to their social obligations. This creates a reputation for untrustworthiness and disloyalty. The selfish individual may achieve short-term gains, but loses relationships and respect over the long run. Their cynicism and exploitation breed conflict and isolation. They fail to experience the fulfillment of mutual care and support. The Stoics caution that selfishness is ultimately a hollow path. We are social creatures meant to live in harmony, not conflict. Seeking to elevate others brings more meaning than elevating only oneself. As Marcus Aurelius stated, what brings a person tranquility is to do what's right and to be focused on the well-being of his fellow man. The Stoic antidote to selfishness involves cultivating empathy and compassion for others. This means putting ourselves in others' shoes, understanding their perspectives, and being sensitive to their needs. It also means acting in ways that benefit others, even when it requires sacrificing our own immediate desires. We can practice empathy by actively listening to others and trying to understand their perspectives, even when we disagree with them. We can also engage in acts of kindness, such as volunteering our time, donating to charity, or simply offering a helping hand to someone in need. By focusing on the needs of others, we can shift our attention away from ourselves and cultivate a more balanced perspective. Furthermore, it can be helpful to examine our own motivations and actions. Are we acting in ways that benefit only ourselves, or are we considering the impact of our actions on others? By becoming more aware of our own selfish tendencies, we can begin to change our behavior. Ultimately, the Stoic approach is to cultivate a sense of interconnectedness with others, recognizing that our own well-being is dependent on the well-being of the community as a whole. 9. The rigidity of stubbornness. Another problematic personality type discussed in Stoic philosophy is the stubborn individual. These people adhere rigidly to their opinions and refuse to listen to reason or compromise. Their inflexibility makes them difficult to deal with. The stubborn person insists on having things their way, no matter what. They are unable or unwilling to consider alternative perspectives advice, or possibilities. Even clear evidence contradicting them will not sway their entrenched position. This breeds resistance to change and growth. The stubborn individual would rather persist in folly than adjust course and admit being mistaken. Adopting a more thoughtful approach would require opening their mind instead of clinging stubbornly to assumptions. Their rigid fixity also keeps the stubborn person from accommodating others' needs in relationships and collaborations. Everything becomes a power struggle rather than a mutual exchange, their way or the highway. This tends to alienate people. Stoicism teaches the folly of stubborn rigidity. While principles are important, the wise retain flexibility in applying them with reason and care. We harm ourselves when we refuse to adapt to changing circumstances or listen to wisdom from others. Our goal should be truth and improvement, not clinging obstinately to fragile ego. The Stoic approach to overcoming stubbornness involves cultivating open-mindedness and a willingness to learn from others. This means being receptive to new ideas, perspectives, and evidence, even when they challenge our existing beliefs. It also means being willing to admit when we are wrong and to change our minds in light of new information. We can practice open-mindedness by actively seeking out different viewpoints and engaging in respectful dialogue with those who hold opposing opinions. This might involve reading books and articles from diverse perspectives or attending public forums and debates. By exposing ourselves to different viewpoints, we can broaden our understanding of the world and challenge our own assumptions. Furthermore, it can be helpful to cultivate a sense of humility and to recognize that we do not have all the answers. This means being willing to admit when we do not know something and being open to learning from others. Ultimately, the Stoic approach is to cultivate a balanced and rational perspective, recognizing the importance of both principles and flexibility, and striving to live in accordance with reason and virtue. 10. The hurtful blindness of the insensitive. The insensitive represent a personality type characterized by a lack of empathy and a disregard for the emotional impact of their words and actions on others. They often fail to pick up on social cues, demonstrate a poor understanding of others' perspectives, and remain oblivious to the potential for their behavior to cause hurt, offense, or upset. This insensitivity can lead to a trail of bruised feelings, anger, and a sense of devaluation in those around them, often without the insensitive individual even realizing the harm they've caused. Their harshness and lack of empathy tend to alienate people, leading to shallow relationships built on a foundation of mistrust. Stoicism, in contrast, places a strong emphasis on developing empathy, compassion, and care in our interactions with others. While we cannot control how others perceive us, we should strive to act with kindness and consideration. Thoughtlessness breeds discord and isolation, whereas thoughtfulness fosters understanding and community. We can actively practice empathy by actively listening to others and trying to understand their perspectives, even when we disagree with them. This might involve asking clarifying questions, reflecting back what we have heard, and demonstrating a genuine interest in their point of view. Additionally, we can consciously try to put ourselves in others' shoes and imagine how they might be feeling in a particular situation. This can help us to develop a greater understanding of their emotions and motivations, and to respond with more sensitivity and compassion. We can also develop a greater awareness of our own biases and assumptions. We can make an effort to challenge these biases and to consider alternative perspectives. Stoicism encourages us to be mindful of the impact of our words and actions on others, and to strive to act in ways that are kind, compassionate, and respectful. By doing so, we can foster stronger relationships, build a more harmonious community, and live a more virtuous life. 11. The corrosive doubt of the cynical. The cynical individual embodies a toxic personality type characterized by a pervasive distrust of others' motives and a deep-seated skepticism toward sincerity, idealism, and goodness. They often dismiss positive intentions as naive or foolish, their reflexive skepticism poisoning hope and eroding the sense of community. Assuming the worst in people, cynics are scornful of virtues like honesty, compassion, and altruism, believing that no one genuinely upholds such principles. This posture often stems from past disappointments and serves as a protective mechanism for the ego, shielding the cynic from further vulnerability. However, their skepticism becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing people away and degrading the very things they doubt. Their caustic remarks and hair-trigger doubt tend to alienate others, corroding human connections and leaving behind a sense of sadness about the good they feel cheated of. Stoicism teaches that while evil exists, we must retain faith in our collective potential for virtue and goodness. Cynicism, in contrast, is corrosive, sapping our power to improve society. Though disappointed, we must remain open to sincerity and work together to increase justice and compassion in the world. Marcus Aurelius's reminder that when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, surly, serves not as an endorsement of cynicism, but as a call to cultivate inner resilience and unwavering virtue in the face of external negativity. To counteract cynicism, Stoicism encourages us to actively cultivate hope and a focus on the positive aspects of humanity. This involves seeking out examples of kindness, compassion, and altruism, and celebrating the good deeds of others. It also means being willing to take risks and to trust in the potential for good in others, even when we have been disappointed in the past. We can challenge our cynical thoughts by actively seeking out evidence that contradicts them. This might involve looking for examples of kindness and generosity in our community, or reading stories about people who have overcome adversity and achieved great things. By focusing on the positive aspects of humanity, we can gradually shift our perspective and cultivate a more hopeful outlook on life. Stoicism calls us to maintain an unwavering commitment to virtue and to approach the world with a spirit of optimism and hope, even in the face of adversity. 12. The web of the manipulative. Manipulative individuals represent a toxic personality type defined by their exploitation and deception of others for personal gain. Their duplicity makes them inherently untrustworthy, treating interactions as strategic chess games aimed at achieving advantage. They plot to turn people against each other, twist situations to their benefit, gain influence through false alliances, and coerce outcomes in their favor. This ruthless calculus makes the manipulator cunning, but ultimately untrustworthy, cultivating a facade of goodwill and sincerity that masks their self-serving agenda. The manipulator forms bonds superficially, dropping people once they lose usefulness, their motives always overriding genuine connection. This exploitative approach to relationships inevitably backfires. While they may achieve short-term victories through cunning schemes, their deceitfulness and betrayal of confidences eventually catch up with them, leading people to see through their facade and refuse to be used any longer. The Stoics recognize that deceit and exploitation ultimately fail and isolate the perpetrator. Treating others with sincerity and respect, seeing them as fellow humans deserving of dignity, not pawns, is the only ethical and prudent path. Manipulation can never breed true cooperation or lasting success. Stoicism advises setting firm boundaries and cultivating self-awareness to recognize and resist manipulation. This involves being assertive in expressing our needs and desires, refusing to be pressured into doing things we don't want to do, and being wary of individuals who try to control or manipulate us through guilt, flattery, or intimidation. We can strengthen our boundaries by practicing saying no to requests that we are uncomfortable with or that do not align with our values. We can also learn to identify and challenge manipulative tactics, such as gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and emotional blackmail. By becoming more aware of these tactics, we can better protect ourselves from being taken advantage of. Stoicism promotes the cultivation of virtue, including honesty, integrity, and fairness, as the foundation for all our interactions with others. By adhering to these principles, we can build relationships based on trust and mutual respect, and avoid the pitfalls of manipulation and exploitation. 13. The perilous path of the reckless. Reckless individuals represent a problematic personality type characterized by their tendency to take unnecessary risks and their failure to consider the potential consequences of their actions. Their carelessness endangers both themselves and others. The reckless person loves courting danger and pushing limits with little forethought, deriving a thrill from foolish gambles, ignoring warning signs, and engaging in hazardous behavior without taking necessary precautions. They often operate under the illusion that rules and consequences don't fully apply to them. This recklessness breeds disaster, leaving a wake of crises that could have easily been avoided with prudence and self-control. Their lack of discipline impacts not just themselves, but also all those affected by their poor choices. Even when their recklessness causes harm, the reckless individual often fails to learn, rationalizing away mistakes, avoiding accountability, and continuing to blindly indulge their whims, failing to cultivate wisdom through reflection on their errors. Stoicism stresses living rationally, not recklessly. While courage has its place, true bravery tempers boldness with reason to produce virtue, not hazard. Recklessness benefits no one in the end. We have duties to ourselves and others to show discipline, self-control, face consequences, and learn from mistakes. Seneca's declaration that nothing is more dishonorable than rashness encapsulates the Stoic view of recklessness as a vice that undermines both personal integrity and social responsibility. The Stoic path involves cultivating prudence and self-control, carefully considering the potential consequences of our actions, and acting in accordance with reason and virtue. This requires developing a strong sense of self-discipline, setting clear boundaries for ourselves, and avoiding situations that might tempt us to act recklessly. We can cultivate these qualities through practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and self-reflection. These practices help us to become more aware of our thoughts and emotions, and to make more conscious choices about how we act in the world. Moreover, we can learn from our past mistakes and strive to avoid repeating them in the future. This involves taking responsibility for our actions, acknowledging the harm we have caused, and making amends to those we have wronged. By learning from our experiences, we can develop greater wisdom and make more informed decisions in the future. Stoicism calls us to live with intention and purpose, guided by reason and virtue, and to avoid the pitfalls of recklessness and self-destructive behavior. 14. The moral vacuum of the unprincipled. The unprincipled individual represents a problematic personality type characterized by a lack of integrity and moral standards. These individuals are willing to go to unethical lengths to achieve their desires, unbound by concepts of right and wrong. The unprincipled person does not feel constrained by ethical considerations, being willing to lie, cheat, steal, betray, break promises, and harm others in pursuit of their ambitions. In their calculus, the end always justifies the means, creating an anything-goes mentality. This creates a situation where they have no inner sense of ethics or conscience, having no trouble deceiving those who trust them or exploiting people's weaknesses for gain. Other people are merely obstacles or tools to be used. This unscrupulous approach inevitably backfires, as the unprincipled person becomes untrustworthy and despised once their duplicity emerges, leaving a trail of disillusionment and lives damaged by their unethical actions, rendering any achievements they gain ultimately hollow. Stoicism stresses that pursuing virtue and noble purposes is the only path to true success. While worldly ambitions come and go, moral integrity endures. We must be willing to lose everything external before sacrificing inner principles. In the end, the unprincipled have nothing of lasting worth. Marcus Aurelius's observation that a branch cut away from the branch beside it is simultaneously cut away from the whole tree underscores the interconnectedness of humanity and the self-destructive nature of unprincipled behavior. The Stoic path involves cultivating a strong moral compass, adhering to principles of honesty, integrity, and fairness in all our interactions with others. This requires developing a deep understanding of our values, setting clear boundaries for ourselves, and refusing to compromise our principles, even when faced with difficult choices. We can cultivate these qualities through practices such as self-reflection, ethical reasoning, and moral courage. Self-reflection involves examining our own actions and motivations and identifying any areas where we may be falling short of our own moral standards. Ethical reasoning involves applying principles of logic and reason to ethical dilemmas, considering the potential consequences of our actions and making decisions that are consistent with our values. Moral courage involves standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult or unpopular. Stoicism calls us to live with integrity and purpose, guided by our moral compass, and to resist the temptation to compromise our principles for personal gain. 15. The darkness of the vicious. The vicious individual represents the final and most dangerous toxic personality type that Stoicism warns against. These malicious individuals take pleasure in cruelty, domination, and causing harm to others. Their callousness makes them profoundly dangerous. The vicious person sees compassion as weakness and derives satisfaction from inflicting pain. They are bullies who terrorize the vulnerable to assert power, where they subtly torment their targets mentally and emotionally. Their aggression covers deep sadism and insecurity. This active destructiveness poisons the vicious person's relationships and community, breeding fear and distrust as their cruelty and exploitation of the weak leaves trauma and despair in their wake. Their malice is an illness of the soul, contagious to all they contact. Stoicism stresses that as social beings, our fates are intertwined, and harming others ultimately harms ourselves. We must vigorously resist the lure of gratuitous cruelty, which destroys human dignity and bonds. True strength comes from uplifting others through empathy and care. The vicious pose a grave threat when in positions of power. Stoicism calls on us to renounce and check those who revel in causing harm. A healthy society allows no room for malice. Marcus Aurelius' statement that to harm others is to harm yourself encapsulates the Stoic understanding of the interconnectedness of humanity and the self-destructive nature of vicious behavior. The vicious may seem to gain temporarily through evil, but they lose their humanity in the process. The Stoic path involves cultivating compassion, empathy, and a commitment to justice. This requires actively resisting the urge to inflict harm on others, and instead, striving to alleviate suffering and promote well-being. It also involves standing up against injustice and oppression and advocating for the rights of the vulnerable. We can cultivate these qualities through practices such as mindfulness, compassion meditation, and social activism. Mindfulness helps us to become more aware of our own thoughts and emotions and to resist the urge to react with anger or violence. Compassion meditation helps us to develop feelings of empathy and compassion for all beings, including those who are suffering. Social activism involves working to create a more just and equitable world for all. Stoicism calls us to be agents of peace and justice, working to create a world where all beings can thrive. Key takeaways: a Stoic summary for a fulfilling life. As we conclude this exploration of toxic personalities through a Stoic lens, it's crucial to distill the key takeaways into actionable insights that can guide our lives. By understanding the nature of these individuals and adopting a Stoic approach, we can cultivate healthier relationships, protect our inner peace, and ultimately lead more fulfilling lives. Discernment is key. The first step towards safeguarding ourselves is to develop the ability to discern toxic traits in others. This requires self-awareness, careful observation, and a willingness to acknowledge potentially harmful behaviors. Virtue as a shield. Living a virtuous life, grounded in principles of honesty, integrity, and compassion, serves as a powerful shield against the negative influence of toxic individuals. By prioritizing virtue, we become less susceptible to manipulation, exploitation, and negativity. Emotional regulation. Cultivating emotional regulation is essential for maintaining inner peace in the face of challenging personalities. Stoic practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and self-reflection can help us to manage our emotions and respond to difficult situations with reason and composure. Setting boundaries. Establishing and maintaining clear boundaries is crucial for protecting ourselves from toxic individuals. This involves being assertive in expressing our needs and desires, refusing to be pressured into doing things we don't want to do, and limiting our exposure to negativity. Focus on what you can control. A central tenet of Stoicism is to focus on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and attitudes, and to accept what we cannot control, the behavior of others. By focusing on our own inner world, we can cultivate resilience and maintain our well-being, regardless of external circumstances. Practice empathy and compassion. While it's important to protect ourselves from toxic individuals, it's also crucial to cultivate empathy and compassion for others, including those who may be struggling with negative traits. By understanding the underlying causes of their behavior, we can approach them with greater understanding and offer support where appropriate. Accept imperfection. No one is perfect, including ourselves. We must be willing to forgive ourselves and others for our shortcomings and to focus on continuous improvement. Live in accordance with nature. The ultimate goal of Stoicism is to live in accordance with nature, which means living a life of reason, virtue, and harmony with the universe. By aligning our lives with these principles, we can cultivate inner peace, resilience, and a sense of purpose. By embracing these Stoic principles, we can navigate the complexities of human relationships with greater wisdom, resilience, and grace. We can create a life filled with meaningful connections, inner peace, and a deep sense of fulfillment. This isn't just about avoiding negativity. It's about actively building a life that reflects our highest values and contributes to the well-being of the world. It is about choosing the path of virtue, and ultimately, it is about choosing to be happy.